So I know there's people out there that are wondering the whole natty or not thing, and I never go into that situation because, quite honestly, that's a petty argument that you never win or lose, because it's just gonna.
What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we are going to be reviewing Thomas DeLauer's lab test results. So a lot of people, want to see this guy's blood test results because he is one of the premier health, longevity, biohacking sort of channels on YouTube. And he's, sort of like a hybrid of fitness meets jacked guy meets, science meets, just overall fucking everything's perfect, like he has the most healthy diet, the most healthy exercise routine, the best body, the best everything. And of course he's natty too, right? Because, you can't possibly be on TRT or on gear when you're in your 30s. Like that's just obscene, right? So he's partially using these lab test results to prove his natty status, even though the title does not allude to that. When he gets to the testosterone part of the endocrinology, he kind of just like shows how, my testosterone equals a natural, so therefore I'm natural. And it's sort of like a cop-out, in my opinion, in terms of what some of these biomarkers are being revealed to portray, which we are going to be getting into. I'm going to give you my interpretation on if I think his blood work looks natural or not. And then we're going to make a judgment at the end if Thomas DeLauer is in fact natural. And we know he fucking hates these because in the middle of the video, he says that people who do it, he basically shades people who do that stuff, like myself. So, but you have to keep in mind, this is all, in the grand scheme of things, it's all a scientific, educational explanation about something that is useful for you to know. So we're going to interpret blood work here, and you're going to find out if this is normal to see in a natural, and a guy who's enhanced. If you were enhanced, what you might be doing, how this might impact you, etc. So here we go. I might jump around a bit because some of the blood markers are less relevant, but interestingly enough, some of the most relevant ones, he kind of skims over. So here he starts here and he says he's going to keep it simple. And perhaps that's the first indicator that he is going out of his way to make it simple because he wants to skim over some pretty key shit. So here we go.
I'm gonna try to explain some of this stuff, but I'm gonna keep it simple so we don't spend a half an hour going over this. The big one that people always ask is, they always say and almost quote, "I'd love to see what your cholesterol looks like with all that saturated fat and with all the fat that you consume on keto."
So you have to keep in mind, a lot of people who watch this channel aren't like guys who are just on gear or guys in the bodybuilding community who want to see like, is this guy natty or not? They want to see his cholesterol too, because they're using that as a proxy for his metabolic health, essentially, because they want to see with his diet model, is it conducive to maintaining a healthy lipid profile? So that is what we're going to see first. And he basically outlines how he has a Mediterranean diet and blah, blah, blah. And we get to his lipids here and we can see lipid panel, cholesterol total, he has under 200 milligrams per deciliter. HDL is 74, which notably, guys on TRT or on gear very infrequently have HDLs over even 50, to be honest. Like most guys who are on TRT are probably in the 40 range if they're lucky, which is just, it's one of the most obvious markers as a proxy for guessing if a guy's on gear or not. You look at his HDL, you look at his SHBG. Obviously, you can look at his testosterone too, but he can clear out of his system if he wants. You look at his luteinizing hormone, his follicle stimulating hormone, among some other stuff. Hematology included, which we're going to get into. But anyways, his HDL looks like a natural and is decent, but you have to consider his diet model too and the amount of supplementation, all the shit he does to intervene. Could that be an artificially elevated level through significant intervention to make it look better for this blood test? I don't know. Anyway, it's a good HDL that I would speculate is like reflective of somebody who is natural. But anyways, his triglycerides are 63, which is good. And his LDL is 96. And then he goes on to, and that's almost above 100. And a lot of people would argue that at this level, he is depositing plaque. So this is, he kind of breaks it down. I'll let him do an explanation and then we'll kind of go on from there.
Okay. Granted, I practice fasting normally, but anyhow, 185 total cholesterol. The reference range is anything under 200 is considered good. Well, let's break it down a little bit more. My HDL cholesterol was 74. My HDL, or my good cholesterol, my high density lipoprotein. That is the cholesterol that gets brought back to the liver, or the carriers that brings fats to the liver, right? pretty decent. I would have liked to see it a little higher if I was getting super granular. I like that number closer to 100 personally. I love super high HDL. My triglycerides, 63. Anything under 150 milligrams per deciliter is considered healthy range.
Considered, but it's not like that's indicative of a average of what kind of a population, you know? That's not necessarily, anyway.
63. So people typically will say if you're following.
But that's a good triglyceride. I'm not trying to say his is bad. I'm just saying, like, when you say this is healthy range, it's like, well, a 300 nanogram per deciliter testosterone is healthy according to a reference range, but is that actually true? Fuck no.
On a ketogenic diet, your triglycerides are going to go through the roof because that's the mobilized form of fat. Well, if your body knows how to use those fats, they don't stay in your bloodstream. My body is taking those mobilized fats and utilizing them. So my triglycerides sat at 63. But then my LDL cholesterol, 96. Okay, anything under 100 is considered healthy and within range.
But that's not necessarily what a optimal level would be by cardiologist standards. But anyways, obviously there's a lot of nuance to that, which he's about to get into.
So yes, it's on the higher end. But what I didn't do is a fractionated panel. So I didn't look into my small particle, my fluffy particle, large particle, etc., because I wanted to see where I was at first.
See, sometimes when I see these guys break down, like, you know, I would have got the fractionated panel, but I didn't, you know, and normally I would see, you know, is it small or large and fluffy or small and not fluffy and not. Like sometimes when they say it, it makes me wonder if they actually know how to interpret like a NMR lipo profile or like these more elaborate lipid profile tests that you could get done to actually see the breakdown, because they don't really. I always hear these guys talk about it, and this is something that it took me a long time to figure out what the fuck was going on, because I would look to guys like this for an explanation on what do I look at my blood work to find this? What do I order on my blood test panel to see this shit? And then what do I look at of those results and how do I interpret it? And these guys, all they would say in their videos was, and like guys in this niche would consistently say, yeah, get like the more elaborate panel, get the fractionated panel. And then it's like, okay, well, what do I order? And then how do I interpret it? And they'd just be like, oh, you have to, you know, LDL means nothing if you don't look at the fractionated panel. And then it's like, okay, well, can you make like a video explaining step by step how to interpret a fractionated panel? Because then no one's fucking doing it. So it makes me wonder when he's saying like large, fluffy, etc. If that his etc. is basically just saying like, I don't really know, but I know it's important, but I actually don't know how to interpret it myself either. So that's why I didn't get it, and that's why I'm not explaining it. So I don't know, because like I would like to see somebody in this kind of like niche just sit down, get the fucking thing and break it down, because all I see is talked about over and over is HDL, LDL, total cholesterol, triglycerides, the ratio of HDL to LDL, blah, blah, blah. And they say the other one is important, but I've never seen anyone actually sit down and break it down. So it would be nice to see that, considering he talks about it very often. Maybe he did a video where he did that, but I have not seen it.
I'm not out of range, so I don't need to investigate it further. It's not uncommon to see your LDL cholesterol up a little bit more, because what's happening is they are carriers that are carrying lipids, and LDL cholesterols carry lipids to sources. So because my body is fat adapted, it's not uncommon to see that. So I'm perfectly happy with that where it is. That's a perfect thing.
Like, I don't know if that was a good explanation, to be honest. I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's hard even for me to tell if he knows for sure what he's talking about there. Because it was like, it almost seems like a skirt to like get around talking about what he said was important to actually do. He's like, oh, I'm not over 100, so I might as well just not even get it, but you should, because it's otherwise important. And I'm not going to tell you how to read it though, or even what to fucking look at. But anyways.
And then we have what's called the cholesterol HDL-C ratio.
Okay, so this is obviously fine because he had, you know, in range levels and blah, blah, blah. Let's go to his fasting glucose was not too good. And then he elaborates how keto can have an effect on insulin sensitivity and blah, blah, blah. Like some of these parameters are good to know for like general health, obviously. But as far as like, you're here for Natty or not, so I'm going to skip ahead so we're not going through his whole thing. And basically he goes on here, he literally shows his physique. Look at what this guy looks like.
It means that I'm in a good state. I'm in a nice neutral state. I'm not breaking down muscle. and I'm not having too much. So what that means is even though I am someone that fasts frequently, I am not breaking down muscle. I'm sparing it, which just further justifies some of the things I talk about, but probably explains why I maintain muscle even when I fast, because I'm staying at this state. So we can kind of...
So you see what he looks like. He's fucking cranked. So when you Google him, Thomas DeLauer, he is 26 years old according to Google. Let's see. That can't be right. If he is, that's fucking insane, but I don't think he is. Okay, 19, so he's 32 according to this website. And when you look at his pictures, he is not just fit and visible abs and like in good shape. This guy is literally like fitness model material. Like, look at this fucking physique, guys. Like, this guy could be like a men's physique pro, probably. Like, look at this. This is like, this is fitness model material, dude. This is like cover model shit. And he's cranked, like very, very jacked while simultaneously being fucking diced to the socks. So this guy is no joke. He has a ton of muscle, and, you know, keep that in mind as we go on to his further results here. So we just saw the video he put up of him working out, but this is literally the guy we're talking about right here. Him holding this dumbbell, this is the fucking dude. So keep that in mind.
Kind of rip through here, but a lot of these things are just your overall components of your metabolic panel. If you see any weird red flags on there, they would be in bold. I like that my uric acid...
Okay, so none of this is really super relevant, like it is for health, but I'm not going to touch on it too much as far as the natty or not.
This is some of the stuff that I know people are going to want to see. My T3 levels.
So he gets onto his thyroid panel's IGF-1 level, and he gets into his hematology after, which is really interesting because we see androgens directly stimulate erythropoiesis in the body. So if you have higher androgens, you're going to drive your hematology panel up, and vice versa. Like, you'll notice guys on people that are being treated with anti-androgens for, like, for example, prostate cancer or something like that. These guys are often going to be anemic because of their low androgen status. For guys like with high androgens, you often see with testosterone replacement therapy, or especially with super physiological exogenous hormone use, anabolic steroid use, you get a dose-dependent increase in your hematology profile. So keep in mind when you're looking at his hematology here, his red blood cell count is 5.8, which is right on the edge of acceptable. Again, his hemoglobin is 16.1. His hematocrit is 0.2% away from the limit too. And that is directly relevant, which we're going to get into shortly. So I'll let him explain it, and then I'll kind of dig back into it.
Stuff like that, because they're all within range, but I can still touch on them. It's at a good level that is indicating that I'm perfectly natural and in a good state there. All right, now let's get into the complete blood count. Okay, this is where things get kind of fun. We're not going to go into a lot of this, like the neutrophils and stuff like that, because they're all within range.
Also, iron. His iron is low, which, why would your iron be low? With a guy who has a fucking optimal diet and lifestyle, is it possible that perhaps you are using a therapeutic phlebotomy because you otherwise have too high of a hematology profile, and you have to therapeutically phlebotomize yourself intermittently to get it back into range, and it causes you indirectly to have low iron? I don't know, seems like a plausible explanation for why everything would be on the high end, and then for some reason your iron's just randomly fucking low. But let's hear what he has to say.
But I can still touch on them. So white blood cell count, 7.5. I'm right smack dab in the middle. It means I probably don't have an infection going on or any serious trauma. Here's where it's kind of fun. People don't like to do cardio. They don't like to do endurance work. Well, it shows in their blood work usually. My red blood cell count is 5.8. The range, 4.2 to 5.8. I am at the very high end of that range, almost out of it. Red blood cells are what deliver oxygen. I do a lot of cardio. I like to run, I like my endurance work, I like my high intensity interval work, and it shows in my blood work. My oxygen carrying capacity. This demonstrates that I am a healthy athletic person. And I'm not saying that to toot my horn. I'm saying it that I'm not someone that just eats a healthy lifestyle and doesn't really work out. This shows.
Or are you bordering on erythrocytosis from your exogenous testosterone use, and maybe you have to therapeutically phlebotomize once in a while? That's what I'd want to know.
Shows that you do need to apply yourself and work out. And then my hemoglobin is sort of the capacity of that. Okay, what actually is delivering it and actually holding it, how much oxygen it can hold. So my hemoglobin is 16.1, and the range is 13.2 to 17.1. So sitting really high on that too, meaning I can deliver oxygen to cells very, very effectively. Now, you usually will see numbers higher if people are doing serious altitude training, but some of these numbers are what people do go to altitude to train for, to achieve these kinds of numbers so that they can perform better. Hematocrit, right in range there, a tad on the high side. The only way you can really lower your hematocrit is to go donate blood, really.
Exactly. So, remember what I said earlier, if you're using an anti-androgen, how you can end up anemic. The same thing happens, guess what, for guys who are hypogonadal and have low T. Guys that produce low natural amounts of androgens who have low T are going to often have a lower hematology profile overall with that hematocrit, the hemoglobin, the red blood cell count. But he's right on the high end, borderline needing to potentially donate despite having a low iron. So he has a low iron simultaneously while he has a bordering super physiologic hematology profile, which would otherwise be something that's driven up by androgens. But does he actually have high androgens? That's what we're going to find out shortly.
That's really the only way. But it's not dangerously high, so I'm not worried about it. Platelets, all that stuff is good. Then we get to one thing that's out of whack. And it's not far out of whack, but it is enough out of whack for me to look at it. My iron levels are a little bit low, which is not uncommon, but it makes you wonder, is Thomas anemic or what's going on? Well, you have a lot of different factors. You have your total iron, but then you also have what is your total iron binding capacity, right? Your TIBC. And that can change depending on the person. So this number is not enough to give you a diagnosis of any kind of issue, but it's also not uncommon to see iron levels dropping if you are overtraining a little bit, if you're working out a little bit too much, because they usually end up dropping as a result of some tissue damage that can occur from working out. That would be my guess on that. I was probably pretty run down because I tend to run myself down, because if you're like me, then it doesn't need an explanation.
Okay, so what's the likelihood that this guy trained himself into the ground before an elaborate blood test that he knew he was going to publish on YouTube and be judged on? Extremely low. If you are smart or even reasonably intelligent about blood work whatsoever, you know how thrown off shit can get if you train hard the day before or even a couple days before your blood test. So what's the likelihood this guy trained himself into the ground and knowingly fucked up his blood test results before doing it, knowing he was going to put out his blood test results and get them interpreted by everyone on the interwebs, including motherfuckers like me? Extremely low in my opinion. So no, I don't think he did a crazy workout beforehand that drove down his iron, and somehow his hematology is super high too, while his testosterone is also bordering fucking hypogonadal, which we're going to get into soon. So anyways, continue, Thomas.
I don't have any other way to live other than just going to redline all the time. None of these really matter because the levels are there. Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, that would be elevated if you had kind of a mutation.
Okay, so let's get into the testosterone.
Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, that would be elevated if you had kind of a mutation. Here's a number that a lot of people are going to want to see. My testosterone levels, 417. The scale is 250 to 827 nanograms per deciliter. I am in the middle on the low side. I've always sat with relatively low testosterone, and I've always done videos that talk about how testosterone is not the end of the world. But my levels are pretty much still within healthy range. They're just on the lower side. So I know there's people out there that are wondering the whole natty or not thing. I never go into that situation because, quite honestly, that's a petty argument that you never win or lose because it's just going to always exist.
Well, you actually can win. You would show your entire endocrinology from front to back. You would show your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone, you'd show your full blood panel, and certain biomarkers that would likely not be fucked with if you weren't using HRT. So arguably, you could say you cleared the whole fucking thing out of your system, restored everything back to baseline with fertility drugs, essentially, and then took your blood work. But I mean, what's the likelihood you did that? I would say low. But anyways, let's see, continue.
But where we stand right here, right now, that is what my testosterone levels are. They're not very high, and they're not too low. So it is what it is. My PSA, which is going to be related to my prostate, right smack in line. I'm in my 30s, so I don't expect to have a prostate issue just yet. You want to look at your free or available testosterone, right? That's the actual testosterone that has an effect. Well, we didn't look at that. We looked at the sex hormone binding globulin instead because that gives us a more dynamic figure, at least as far as I'm concerned. I want to see how much binding globulin I have. So basically,
I don't know why you would use only SHBG because it's a dynamic figure when you could just show us your free test too. Like the whole point of the SHBG is to figure out what your freely circulating androgens are, your free DHT, your free testosterone. So why, like, you're just not trusting us to do the calculation because you think we're too dumb to like figure it out? So you're just going to show us the SHBG and use that as a proxy for good endocrine function? Like, I don't get it. So we can see your total test is pretty shitty. So now you're going to show us your SHBG and assert that your free test is okay, even though it's like low normal as fuck. Let's see.
You have your total testosterone, and this SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, binds to that testosterone and yields it to be either useless because it's bound to it, and whatever you're left over is what you can actually use. I'm at a 39 with a healthy scale between 10 and 50.
So he's on the high end of normal with SHBG, which would otherwise reinforce potentially that he's natural. And the reason being, when you administer exogenous androgens, one of the flagship outcomes is it drives down your SHBG. However, we have to keep in mind with Thomas is he is on a keto diet. So what is the main thing we see with keto diets? We see a disproportionately shitty free testosterone level because it drives their SHBG into the sky. And then it results in a complete lack of bioavailable androgens to actually use unless you implement cyclically implementing carbohydrates to keep your metabolism firing, keep your everything going the way it should fucking be, which is something that is often overlooked by carnivore diet zealots and guys on keto who don't understand that intermittently implementing things that are carbohydrates can actually be healthy for you and your metabolism as well as your sex hormones. So with him, I'm almost thinking that this is a good SHBG that would indicate, potentially being natural. But for me, I think personally that his SHBG would otherwise be higher, and it's his exogenous TRT that is keeping it looking normal. That is my speculation. I could be wrong on that because his SHBG certainly looks like a natural, but just traditionally I see guys on the keto diet with fucking horrible SHBGs, shitty free test if they don't implement carbs intermittently. Maybe he does implement carbs intermittently, but I know he's a big keto guy. And this is a very recent development where a lot of the people in the keto community have realized that implementing carbs is actually a reasonable strategy to optimize free androgen levels. And this is something even Paul Saladino, the carnivore diet headmaster, whatever the fuck he is, he recently started implementing honey once he realized that going long-term full-blown keto is not going to be conducive to long-term optimal performance and quality of life. And this is something I mentioned in my first video where I detailed, the carnivore diet blood work and kind of elaborated on how it's fucking shitty for free testosterone levels. Intermittently, keto is great. Like, it's fine. It's not a bad diet model. It's just never having carbs for months and months and months on end is not going to be good. So his 39 SHBG looks natural. I just think it is being artificially, I think it's just hanging in the balance there from his diet model. And it's not like everyone on TRT is going to have a super low, like clinically low SHBG. It's just like something you typically will see guys jabbing exogenous T. I guess it depends on the frequency of administration too. You'll see them, dropping down into sort of the lower end of the reference range relative to what they would otherwise be without exogenous TRT. So anyway, circling back to his testosterone, remember this guy has a 417 nanogram per deciliter testosterone level. Even though he literally looks like this.
I was probably pretty run down because I tend to run myself down because
so he looks like this and he's walking around with a 417 nanogram per deciliter test level with a 39 SHBG. What is the likelihood of that? And what is the likelihood that his hematology profile is going to be right on the borderline of high with a low iron? So it's like flagship. Look, to me, it looks like he came off his TRT periodically to get this blood test done, make it look normal, and the kind of icing on the cake, or the whatever the saying is, that is the saying, the icing on the cake, whatever the fuck, he didn't show his luteinizing hormone or follicle stimulating hormone. If you were on exogenous TRT, predictably, your LH and FSH would be low. If you're somebody who's not confident that your LH and FSH has been restored, or it just, maybe he didn't test for it to begin with, which a lot of guys on TRT don't even do, or he didn't want it tested, or he got it tested and it looked like shit because it would have indicated he's on TRT, so he didn't include it. So I don't know what the reason was, but I mean, like, if he wanted to prove he was a natural, that would have been one of the easiest things to include, is adding in his LH and FSH levels into that blood test result. Now for me, when I'm interpreting this, all I see is just like red flags upon red flags. This guy's physique is not indicative of a guy who's borderline hypogonadal. Like, keep in mind, the reference range for total testosterone is based on like a not optimized population. It's based on like a lot of shitty people too. And when I say shitty, I mean like people with shitty production. So we have like people on the high end, which are like close to 1,000, and on the border of on the bottom, we have like 300. And if you're underneath that, you're considered hypogonadal. This guy is 32 and he has a 417, yet he looks like this. And his hematology profile is right at the top, and his iron is suspiciously low for like no reason, even though his diet model is like fucking perfect. So he has like excuses upon excuses of why this shit is the way it is. He also just conveniently skipped over having his LH and FSH on the blood test results. His testosterone is just coincidentally like shitty as hell, to the point where you'd be like, dude, you're gonna need TRT in a couple of years, or even now maybe. Like, are you symptomatic right now? Because he is, like, for the amount of muscle mass he has, it's almost nonsensical how much fucking mass he's holding. And he's able to have this crazy work schedule and, you know, be redlining all the time and blah, 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 and still feel fine and perform fine despite being 417. Like, that's nuts, dude. So at his age, 32, with perfectly optimized everything, what is the likelihood you'd have a 417 nanogram per deciliter total test? Not very high, in my opinion. Like, you would, for him to justify, like, when he sees other lab blood test results, he's like, oh, the high end of normal, like, this is right where I want it, this is good. But then he sees testosterone at 417 and he's not concerned. He's like, yeah, this is fine, this is fine. I'd be like, dude, it's definitely not fine, like, fuck. So if your diet is literally this on point, you're sleeping properly, everything is fucking optimized, you're dialed in, you're strength training, you're this jacked, you have a 417, like, something's going on, dude. So again, circling back to everything, low iron, to me, sort of indicative of therapeutic phlebotomies potentially. High hematology profile, despite a simultaneous low iron, kind of fucking odd. T on the borderline of being like what I would consider like clinically low for a guy of his age and muscle mass. I'd be like, dude, 417, like, you might as well be classified as hypogonadal at this point, in my opinion. Like, sure, get down to 300, and then underneath that, sure, you're actually clinically hypogonadal for even a 65-year-old. But dude, for 32 and your like lifestyle, training, diet optimization, sleep, fucking hygiene, all that kind of shit, to have a 417, like, you might as well be hypogonadal at that point clinically. And then just everything else I mentioned, like, it just doesn't add up to me. Like, where's the, and the LH and FSH is not shown. So to me, it's a little bit suspect, and this is again just speculation. And again, like he mentioned, there's no way to win with the natty or not thing. Well, it's like, you could have at least made a better case for yourself by including the LH and FSH, and kind of like, I don't know, maybe had a, I don't know, I just feel like the explanation for some of the other markers were just like insufficient, or maybe just like pandered to feeling like his audience wouldn't understand what he was talking about, you know? So I don't know, like, this does not look promising for Thomas. So for a natty or not judgment, I would say not natty. I think he probably was on TRT or is on TRT, and probably like came off periodically to lower his test levels so they looked normal and he could go in and get a blood test done. It intentionally may have not done the LH and FSH. The rest of the shit looked disproportionate and weird, with flagship markers of hormone intervention and other practices that otherwise may be deployed by somebody on TRT, and just like a bunch of weird stuff that just doesn't add up for a guy who's like perfectly natural, 32 years old, optimized diet and everything, best lifestyle, literally like the top YouTuber for like health and diet and longevity essentially, and performance and blah, blah, blah. It's just weird. So anyways, that is my judgment. I could be wrong, but that's just based on the evidence provided by him. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you think Thomas DeLauer is natty based on his physique, based on his age, based on his blood test results? What do you think? Let me know. Comments down below. All of the comments help the algorithm, so they're much appreciated when you drop them down. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts if you want to listen on audio instead of burn through your data at the gym or in the car or whatever, as well as destroy your battery because of watching on video. When you don't have good Wi-Fi, you're going to destroy your data, you're going to destroy your battery, blah, blah, blah. So it's good to be on the podcast platform too. If you're there, drop a 5-star rating, helps a lot. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, if you are seeking hormone optimization or testosterone replacement therapy or hair loss prevention medication or anything relevant to any of these services we provide, check it out. It's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home, very convenient and the way of the future in my opinion, as well as Gorilla Mind, Gorilla Mode, my turnkey nootropic and pre-workout formulas. I designed these from scratch myself and combine all of the efficacious dosages and synergistic combinations of ingredients that I feel are best suited for making the optimal pre-workout, not only for a person seeking, maximum pump, intracellular hyperhydration, plasma expanders, NO precursors, etc., as well as the cognitive enhancing components of these products. But we also have tailored formulas for stimulant-free, as well as for stim junkies. It's all there. We have Gorilla Mode, the classic formula. We have Gorilla Mode Nitric, the stimulant-free formula, as well as Gorilla Mode Stim. And I encourage you to pull out your current pre, look at the label, compare it to the dosages on Gorilla Mode Classic, compare it to the dosages on Gorilla Mode Nitric, compare it to the dosages on Gorilla Mode Stim, and you'll see pretty transparently why we are quickly becoming a leader in this industry. So check it out if that interests you and you want to support the channel. Talk to you guys soon.